begin.
What's up, nation? Welcome to another edition of the Wise Take MLB First Look. I am your host, CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. Should have been a really good night on Tuesday. My Yankee stack and my D-back stack were ruined by McKay. We'll see how he finishes, but a terrible start. 4 earned runs in the first inning with no Ks. Not a good start against the Padres. Top prospect for the Rays. Supposedly he could hit. He can do a lot of things, but one thing he hasn't done very consistently in the majors is pitch, and that's a problem. But I'm not going to beat him up too hard. I've calmed down a little bit. I was ready to. I've calmed down a little bit. The Padres are actually... they can be tough on lefties, even though I still think they suck as a team. They can be a little tougher on lefties, so he's got some ways. He's got nasty stuff. He's just got to learn how to consistently put it together. But the offenses, I think we were all on. I know, just looking at the Y stream we did, which is our live show we do before lock for our premium subscribers at wisec.com. I know the guys were on the Dodgers, the D-backs, the Yankees, all did well. Pitching was a little choppy, of course, and on a day like today, it looks like Madison Bumgarner and Jose Quintana, of all people, are going to be like the nut combinations for tournaments. I'm sure that the smaller tournaments, aside from the Donkey, didn't necessarily need him, but if you did have them, you had a pretty good shot to get going. I went with the McKay-May combo. May did well. On FanDuel, guys kind of got screwed because of the pitch count. He was 1 out away from a quality start, and they pulled him for the bullpen. He did have a rough start to though. He had a chance to go 6. They're not letting him go more than 100. That's the bottom line. But anyway, McKay, you screwed me again, bro. Not cool. Not cool. One thing that's been happening a lot to us is the pitchers have been getting pushed back. And it's kind of annoying when you do a first look show and put all this time and effort and wake up and the whole perspective of the slate changes. So hopefully there are no scratches going into this at the moment. So looks like we have a 6-game slate on DraftKings here at night. I will be doing an early slate article for those subscribed to wisec.com covering cash and GPPs as I always do. So if you're a member of the Wise Take Nation, or even if you're on a day pass, you will get access to that article for the 9-game early slate tomorrow. We're going to talk about the 6-game night slate, or the main slate, if you will. So last night we talked about Clayton Kershaw as your cash game pitcher. This is the same deal. He's still your cash game pitcher. We saw May did well today. Kershaw, obviously, much more established than May. So in cash games, he's who you're rocking with as an SP1. From there, it's interesting. If you wanted to do a double spend up, it looks like we don't have cores on this night slate. If you wanted to do some sort of double spend up, I think Marco Gonzalez is worth a look against Detroit. Marco Gonzalez coming off a 9 strikeout game, and he left the game with an injury. I think he took a bouncer off his leg. So he could have maybe even stayed a little bit longer. Usually goes well over 100 pitches and didn't quite hit that threshold. Don't like the price, 87, but it is the Tigers. However, it's probably going to be a little easier to get some builds if we go down a little bit from there. Archer is another option, probably more of a tournament option because he's so inconsistent, but the strikeouts have been there for Archer for the most part when he's faced the right opponents. The Angels aren't typically a team that we think of in terms of strikeouts, but lately they really have been striking out a ton. But again, probably better reserved for tournaments. Brad Keller literally got knocked back down to reality after getting rocked by the Tigers, who I just said suck. That's baseball for you, right? Plays the Minnesota Twins, the team number 1 in the league in home runs. Gets a 22. Sees Detroit, one of the worst offenses in the game, gets a 7.7. Thug life. Another option that I would prefer more in tournaments, I think that as far as cheap guys go, Peters is probably the cheapest I'd be willing to go in cash. The Pirates have struggled against lefties on and off the entire season. Recently, they've also showed signs. And Peters has been surprisingly good against really, really tough opponents. He put up a 16 against Cleveland. Struck out 5 Indians in 7 2/3, which isn't a lot in terms of K rate. But the Indians are a good offense, and they're tough to strike out. Saw Boston struck out 8, another team that doesn't really strike out a ton. So Pittsburgh's a tough team to strike out, but Peters has been managing well in these types of games. So he makes the most sense to me. Again, maybe I'm jumping the gun. Maybe that's more of a tournament thing. But if you are trying to save money at this position, I just don't see it. I think Gonzalez, Archer, maybe. Keller, I personally don't trust, though I get it. So for me, it's Peters. And I like this combo for tournaments also. I think in tournaments, you could look to maybe come off of, Kershaw and see maybe go with like a Gonzalez or Archer paired with the Peters. Eliza Hernandez, I do think, is a very good pitcher, but the Dodgers are a very, very tough opponent. So that's kind of like not a place that I'm really interested in now. But yeah, I do like Peters. He seems to make sense, and he's the only cheap guy that makes sense. And again, you can pair him with Kershaw and Cash. In tournaments, you can still stick with the same combo, or you can try to, because Kershaw is going to be the most popular pitcher on the slate, hands down. So if that happens, people may struggle to be able to afford some of the more expensive bats. So one way you can combat that is to come off of Kershaw and go with a Marco or an Archer or something cheaper, and just have more money to work with. I don't know what Peters' ownership will be tomorrow, but Kershaw I know will be very popular, and even Kershaw Peters still leaves you with $39.87 per position. Whereas if you go, like I said, say you go with Archer, you're at $44.37. So we'll have to check the umpires tomorrow, see what the lineups look like. But I do think that's an interesting tournament combination. Going on to the bats. So I think Seattle should be fairly popular. Not saying that they'll necessarily be I guess they probably will be the chalk on the slate now that I think about it. They get Edwin Jackson. They just went nuts today against Boyd, who has been a pretty good pitcher, not lately, but in general. Edwin Jackson, since going to Detroit, has actually been okay. He's coming off a decent outing against Kansas City. It looks like maybe was that his first start? I guess that was his first start. But yeah, did well against Kansas City. But I understand the love for Seattle. Seattle is probably also cheap. Let me see. They're cheap enough if you are doing the Kershaw thing. Kyle Seager hit 3 home runs today. Tom Murphy, who probably won't even be in the lineup, hit 2. But the Seattle Mariners put up a ton of runs, so I think they will be pretty popular, and for good reason. Because of what they just did and how bad Detroit's bullpen is. But looking at some of the expensive bats, teams like the Braves are kind of interesting to me because, like I said, in tournaments, people won't be able to afford a lot of these Brave stacks. And if you can manage to look at this Albies, Freeman, they're all very, very expensive. If you can manage to squeeze these guys in, maybe we get some value opened up. Culberson is a pretty cheap option. You can go with Donaldson. Not a ton of money to work with, and that is why the stack will probably be low owned, because if you're playing Kershaw at all, look at that. Just with Kershaw, we're down to 32. So this is a situation where you're going to need, with Peters and Archer, you could barely make it work. But you can make it work. Maybe you drop the Keller, 36, a little more feasible, but that makes the Braves offense kind of interesting to me alone. Matz does give up a lot of hard contact. He's a guy that's been barreled a lot. The Braves are very good against lefties. I think that they certainly stand out. I don't mind the Mets on the other side of that game either. Atlanta's typically warm and humid, typically one of the better hitting environments and hitting parks. And Keuchel I haven't been very impressed with. I think J.D. Davis has been pretty hot. I hate to say this, but Frazier I think is in play. So those are the ones that kind of stand out to me off the gate. The rest of what we have to work with, I'm sure some people don't want to pick on Nola. I didn't mention Cole Hamels as a pitcher. Philly's been really bad against lefties. We may have to consider Cole Hamels. I'm not a big Cole Hamels guy, but Philly's been terrible to lefties. I have to note that. But yeah, so what I expect to be popular is Kershaw in some fashion. Not quite sure what people do with the SP2. I guess it depends on how much money they have left over after they stack Seattle, because I think they will stack the hell out of Seattle. And just kind of running through here and trying to build a quick squad. If I can get into this 5-man here, say Santana, you can see 42.75. It's not crazy cheap, so maybe that does increase ownership to guys like Peters. Maybe people will see how low they can drop, because even a 5-man Seattle, not that 5-mans are like popular. 5-mans are still contrarians, a contrarian way to go, but I do think Seager very expensive. I'm sorry, popular. Vogelbach probably very popular. It is Edwin Jackson. I do feel like Edwin Jackson is worse against righties though. So if you go to Seattle, don't ignore the righties. Yeah, and like I said, in tournaments, I think that pivoting to an Atlanta, even the Mets, or that game in general, kind of seems juicy. Going to be an interesting slate. It's kind of growing on me the more I consider it. The problem is it's never fun to fade Kershaw as the chalk against Miami, because if you're wrong about the fade, you're crushed, because Kershaw could just do the dirty. That we know. But in cash, you just play him. That's the benefit of playing cash in tournaments both, is you can kind of play the chalkier stuff in your cash game, the optimal plays that are typically chalky, and then, do something a little different in tournaments and see if you can get to the top. That's going to do it for this particular first look show. Don't forget to check us out at YC.com for more fire DFS content. NFL season is coming. We have a sale right now for the NFL full season DFS pass. Full season. On week 1, the price will be, by the time the first game comes on Sunday, that's Sunday, the first NFL Sunday, price will be $149.99 for the season. You can get it now for $99.99, but you got to do it before September 1st. Promo code Early Owl NFL 2019, no spaces. Early Owl NFL 2019, no spaces. And you'll get it for $99.99. Don't tell nobody though. And if you're still rocking out baseball with us, you can certainly pick up the rest of the season for baseball. We have that up on the site pretty cheap. And at the very least, get yourself a day pass. Try us out. $2.50. We'll get you in for a full day of MLB access. You'll get access to everything but the Slack chat. Slack chat is for monthly members or higher. And again, go check out our options at ysite.com. We have plans that could fit any type of player and any type of, payment flexibility that you need. Anyway, top 3 pitchers. Kershaw's got to be number 1. For now, I'm going to say Archer, only because I'm a little worried about Marco. I guess Kershaw. Man, HAMELS is kind of growing on me too. That might be the pivot. But for now, we'll go Kershaw. We'll go Archer. And one of my favorites right now is probably Dylan Peters. Scary as hell, I know. As far as stacks go, so Seattle is the optimal stack, I think, or I expect to be one of the more popular ones. Atlanta's probably my favorite pivot because they're, like I said, they're very expensive, and I don't think people who play Kershaw will be able to afford the full stack. And then I think the Mets in that same game, like I said, one of the better hitting environments. Keuchel has not been very good, and the Mets, for the most part, are playing fairly well. Dong watch time. So Dong watch, let's go with a little bit of a different one. Let's go with Culberson. Who is shortstop eligible? That's kind of huge. Culberson against the lefty. Pete Alonso against the lefty. You can see, like I said, I do like that game. And then we're going to go with Santana from Seattle. That's how we're going to do that. So Pete Alonso, Charlie Culberson, Domingo Santana. That's the Dong watch. And guys, if you could do me a favor and hit that like button, really appreciate it. We're going to crank up the DFS content come NFL season, come NBA season. Baseball, one of the slower DFS, more grindier type seasons. So we're going to keep rocking it out. Do what we do as professionals. This is a business. We do what we do for the nation. Everything we do is for the nation. But yeah, get ready. Make sure you're following the channel, have the notifications bell on. And don't forget to check out our other podcast, the Wise Take Nation podcast. It's more about sports in general, entertainment, everything and anything. Got some cool stuff brewing with that show, so don't forget to check that out as well. So, for myself, the entire Wise Tech Nation, as always, good luck.
Yeah.